called The Kingdom of the Sock Eaters by David A. Miller. Okay, you guys. Get comfy and cozy. Everybody has lost a sock from time to time. Boring grown-ups blame washing machines, but I'm going to tell you what really happens to the odd socks. It started with my mom shouting up the stairs, "If you don't find those missing socks, it's no pudding for you, Joshua." Mom assumed I was hiding them, as if it was just me and her in the house, and oddly, it was my socks that were always odd. My favorite ones as well, you know. The ones with the best pictures on them, well, it was always those ones that seemed to go missing. I looked in my drawer, under the bed, and in the wardrobe. I even unpaired my other socks, thinking maybe there was a mistake, but no luck. I thought to myself, well, where else could they be? Maybe in the laundry room? So I checked under the washing machine and in the cupboards of the laundry, but there was nothing there. I had no choice but to beg. "Please, Mom," I pleaded. But she said, "Nope, no pudding for you. I don't buy you socks so you can lose them all one by one." That night, as I lay there in bed, I decided that I would go and have one more look around the laundry room. It was pitch black, but I wasn't scared of the dark, so I didn't bother switching on the lights. But as I walked into the laundry room, I heard a scrambling and the shutting of cupboards. I thought that's strange. I decided to look behind the washing machine, so I pulled the washing machine forward, and then I realized that I could see a light behind it. Suddenly, two figures behind me pushed me into this hole that seemed to be swirling around and around. I yelled, "Mom!" Then I bumped my head, and everything went dark. As soon as I opened my eyes, I was met with the strangest sight I've ever seen. A murky green sky and purple grass, not to mention some weird-looking tree with what looked like white bananas dangling off of it. Suddenly, there were two yellow creatures with 4 arms standing over me. They had big smiles on their faces and long tongues. One of them said, in a squeaky voice, "Come with us." I wasn't going to argue, as they were so cute. I nearly laughed, but I didn't think they would like that much. They marched me over hills of purple grass. I couldn't see a single house or building. Nothing, just purple grass and odd-looking trees, until we reached a hole in the ground. I did ask, "What's down there?" But they just kept smiling, with their tongues out and pointing at the hole. So I realized that they wanted me to step in. Luckily, it wasn't far down. We slid into the tunnel, lit with torches. We walked for a few minutes until we reached a giant door with a silver knocker on it. Seconds later, the giant doors opened, and inside was a large throne room. Sitting on thrones were 2 large yellow creatures with 4 arms and silly smiles on their faces. On either side of them, they were huge piles of socks. A smaller creature stepped forward and said in a squeaky voice, "Welcome to the kingdom of the sock eaters. I'm Jingon, the king's announcer. Who are you?" "My name's Joshua," I said. "And how did you get here, Joshua?" One of the yellow creatures on the throne, I was guessing she was the queen, said coldly, "That is a good question." A squeaky voice behind me said, "Deluc brought him here." Deluc was suddenly interrupted by the queen, slamming her specter on the floor. She said, "You brought him here. You will go directly to the pit of stink." I stepped forward and said, "Please wait. Give him a chance." An older-looking sock eater stepped out from behind a statue and said, "Why would you protect the one who took you from your home?" "Well, I make mistakes, and I always want my mom to forgive me, so..." The older sock eater, who later told me he was called Ogi, said, "That's very good logic you have there, little one." The queen said, "Well, in light of these words from Joshua, Luke, you should not be sent to the pit of stink, but instead you should do the washing up for a month." The king stood up and said, "It must be lunchtime. Let's get some food. Joshua, you must join us." And then he jumped into the huge pile of socks in front of him. Minutes passed, and eventually he emerged from the pile and said, "Are you not hungry?" I pulled a face and said, "I'm not really a fan of socks." Everybody in the room looked at me as if I had said pizza was nasty. After the king had finished his lunch, which was a pile of socks the size of my dog, and by the way, I have a Great Dane, he said, "Come with me, Joshua, and you too, Deluc. We need to go and have a talk about what we do now," in a very serious voice. Both me and Deluc gulped. We know when it's serious talk. We walked down a long corridor covered with photos of kings. From before this king, I'm guessing. Finally, reaching his destination, the king pulled a book off the shelves and opened it to a family tree that unfolded and unfolded and unfolded. The king said in a serious voice, "Do you know what this is?" I said, "Yes." "It is it?" He interrupted me and said, "It's all the kings before me. Do you know what they all had in common, Joshua and Duluth?" Me and Duluth both looked puzzled. I thought they all have crowns on, but I didn't say it. The king said, "Never before have they ever had a human boy visit them." After the king spoke for 1 hour about how there were rules and things that weren't allowed to happen, the number one rule apparently was that humans were not supposed to know that sock eaters existed, let alone come to the kingdom of sock eaters. He looked sternly at Duluth, and Duluth bowed his head and said Joshua found the gateway behind the washing machine. I didn't know what to do. I said, "He's right. It was my fault. I was looking for my missing socks. My mom said I couldn't have pudding until they were found." "I like this mom. Is she your leader?" I said, "Well, yeah. Kind of." The king nodded and said, "She's a strong leader." The king of the sock eaters said, "About your pudding situation, do you know what socks you are missing?" I nodded my head and said, "Come with me." And he took me to a room with socks in it, hundreds of piles, with hundreds of socks in each pile. He said grandly, "Find your socks." I'd explained that there's no way I could find them amongst all those socks. He said, "Do you think we are animals? It's organized. Firstly, how old are you? Then where do you live? And finally, are you a boy or a girl?" Then he pointed to a pile, and there they were, my missing socks. I shoved them in my pocket. Turned to the king. "Well, what do we do about him being here?" The king said, "We will have to say we did it on purpose, Joshua. We accept the job of bringer of socks. All you have to do, so you do not upset this mom, is give us your socks with holes." I thought that sounded fine with me, as I normally just threw them in the bin. As we walked back to the main room, the king spoke of his plan, but we reached the throne room. It fell silent. The king raised his voice. He spoke to the room about sock eaters and said, "I have recruited young Joshua to be a bringer of socks, to help keep us fed." And the sock eaters clapped. With that, the king said to Luke, "Take him back to his home, please." To Luke, who was already smiling, smiled even more as we walked out of the throne room, waving at all the sock eaters. As we walked down the tunnel lit with torches, I thought about all I had seen today. Still, I was very eager to get back home. As I climbed out of the hole, I patted my pockets for the missing socks that the king had helped me find. Then me and Luke jogged across the purple grass, admiring the murky green sky until we reached the swirling hole from which I came. Duluth said, "On the way back, it's a bit bumpy, so arms in, okay?" And he licked my whole face in one lick. I said, "Yuck!" And then he pushed me into the swirly hole. After swirling around and around for what seemed forever, I landed back at home with a crash. I had bumped my head, but not too bad. My mom came rushing in to see me sitting on the floor rubbing my head next to a huge pile of paired socks. She said, "I knew you would find them. You must have really wanted that pudding." So that's what really happened to your missing socks, whether they're clean or dirty. It's not the washing machine or the dryer eating them up. It's the sock eaters, and they're very hungry. The end.